taking the time to be interviewed tonight. I really appreciate you, letting us know about Friends of Kananaskis, what initiatives you're working on this season, and what areas that you look after, because some people probably don't know. So anyway, thank you for joining tonight. I guess we can just jump right in to the questions here. All right, so I guess first, can you let us know what your roles are with Friends of Kananaskis?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm the executive director for the Friends. I've been with the organization for, I think I'm going on 6 years this summer, and initially started off as more of a program coordinator, and took on the ED position to really drive the organization. And over the years, we've been evolving and continue to build on our successes, some of which we'll be sharing with you. And it's a great little not-for-profit. It's a registered charity, so it has kind of that charity status. Therefore, we can receive donations and issue tax receipts. Mm-hmm. And it's been around for a while. It was established in 1996, and so throughout that time, it has had an array of projects, but I'd say what has been true to its core is the trail stewardship and that volunteer engagement piece.
Nice. And Tim, what is your role with Friends of Kananaskis?
Unmute, there we go. You think I'd have this figured out now with like 5 Zoom meetings a day. So my role is program coordinator with the Friends. When the Friends started in '96 was when I first moved out to the Bow Valley. Grew up in Montreal and came out here for 1 winter of skiing, and still here. So I actually got to know Nancy. We used to play ultimate frisbee together. And just over 2 years ago, I joined the Friends in the program coordinator role. So it's kind of a part-time role, but mainly kind of doing a lot of the operational side of coordinating our volunteer trail stewardship days and helping out with the occasional event that we host once in a while. And I live in Canmore. I originally lived in Banff when I first moved here. And here we are, 20 years in. Even
nice.
More now, I guess.
That sounds like a really fun role.
And I'll add, Fiona, that we're also both trail crews, and so aside from our kind of office duties of our job responsibility, we are also in the capacity of being out there leading crews, and so it being in the field is kind of the perks or benefits of our jobs. It also kind of really adds value to our job to be able to be out there, so that when we come back and we're doing the office part, it really all comes together.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. And then how long have you both been biking for? I'm assuming that you're bikers, but maybe you're not bikers.
Yeah, definitely. Most of my mountain biking started in Mont Tremblant, out east. I'm also from a town near Montreal, in Quebec, and so Mont Tremblant is where kind of it all started for me. There's good riding out there, and then kind of came back out here and kept at it. And so definitely over 20 years of riding. And I'd say a few more races and competition type of events in the last few years than I have typically done.
Oh, nice. What kind of racing?
I did the Golden 2-4 last year, and I did the Salty Dog with the year before that. And nice. They're really more of a kick my butt into gear early in the season, and then you're kind of good to go. So and I enjoy doing those types of events with friends.
Well, that's awesome. They're so fun. I really like to go. Both those races are awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Tim, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I got my first mountain bike in '93, and yeah, I came out west with it, and have been riding since. I love mountain biking. I've recently got into bike packing quite a bit,
Nice.
and like Nancy, I've done a few kind of eventy things over the years. I was part of a 5-person team for the Canmore 24 Hours for, I think we did it 9 years in a row, which was
Oh, wow.
pretty fun. Missed that event for sure. That was a good one.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really love riding around here. If you know, I think Nancy and I were chatting like favorite trail wise. Like I think we both really love the Minnewanka Trail in Banff. But if I had to pick one in Kananaskis or the Bow Valley, I really like just getting out on the benchlands here and doing the ride from Cougar Creek out to Harvey Heights and back. It's like I live on that side of the valley, and it's usually like pretty quiet, and there's some pretty awesome views when you get to the Harvey Heights end. And um, yeah, couple of bear sightings over the years, which always keeps it fun. But
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say I've never ridden some of the classics like Jumping Pound or Cox Hill, and Nancy and I just made a pledge to do that this summer, and I have to because she's my boss, so she said.
That's a good goal to have. I love that trail. It's awesome. Yeah. It has such great views too.
Hmm.
Yeah. And Nancy, what's your favorite trail in the area?
So I agree with Tim. I think Minnewanka Lake Trail is great. I think because it has restrictions, maybe it makes it extra special when you are on it
Mm.
versus it always being a given open anytime. Yeah, in the valley, I mean, here I live in Canmore as well, and so there's, you know, local trails are, I'd say, not a favorite, but just the access is pretty hard to beat. But then going out, I've had some good days on Jumping Pound and some of those more traditional trails. And I've been enjoying exploring the High Rockies and various sections over the last little while as well.
I actually I haven't done High Rockies yet, so I should put that on my list for this summer.
The whole thing, but I've definitely just enjoyed doing sections as like outings.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, and then what trails and areas does Friends of Kananaskis look after?
Yeah, so as you all know, Kananaskis country is a big area. It may not be like a one park similar to Banff National Park. It's quite more complex in that it has different types of parks and managed areas. But what kind of is encompassing for Kananaskis is a large area, and it has, over the years, I mean, since I've been with the organization, we've pretty much dipped our, how could I put it? We've put our Pulaskis in a lot of dirt throughout the area. In Peter Lougheed, we've worked on hiking trails and primarily snowshoe trails. In the Spray Valley, the High Rockies Trail is something we were involved with the construction and some of the finishing. Bow Valley has a lot, like from a Razor's Edge, as some of you may know and have ridden, is we're building a 2-kilometer connector trail, and so that's been an ongoing project. And in this area, the Nordic Center has been an ongoing area, especially when they had the championships a few years ago. We were really involved in the course, and over the years, it's just they've added a few really good trails to that system.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in the Elbow Sheep, and more recently, we've endorsed, or we're kind of adopting a new area, which we're really excited about. And so the Kananaskis, as I mentioned, all these different designations of kind of, some of them are provincial parks, some of them, some areas are public land.
Mm-hmm.
And then within those, they also have varying levels of conservation or preservation. So the Kananaskis Public Land Use Zone would be like from the Bragg Creek, the West Bragg Creek trails are kind of public land, and then the if you go to the Jumping Pound Road on the back end, and then if you make your way all the way down to where Highway 68 and that road meet, that's a big pie of public land. So trails, Moose Mountain would be in that kind of pie, along with Prairie Creek and Powder Face, and then Jumping Pound and Cox Hill. And so we are taking on the big kind of ambitious because it's a big area that hasn't really had much maintenance over 40 years since those trails were established, that we're going to help out and be giving those trails some TLC. So that's a pretty exciting area to be setting operations, primarily just maintenance of the designated trails.
Yeah, that is a big area.
Yeah, and I think like last year, 2019 was the first year of working in that public land use zone. So, you know, there's the Greater Bragg Trail Association and the Moose Mountain Bike Society that cover those trail networks. And then as you keep going west, when you get to like Prairie Link and Prairie Creek and Powder Face and Jumping Pound and all that, those are the ones that haven't really seen any attention. And last summer was mainly just kind of walking, using a GPS tool to record work spots, places that needed some love. And then we did a few trail days on Prairie Creek, and hopefully, you know, a lot of unknowns about this year, but it'd be awesome to get up on Jumping Pound and Cox, especially some of the climbs and descents. Just like some of them are pretty battered. So hopefully doing some work there. And then just as a side note, like within the Canmore area, the Canmore Trail Alliance is kind of like a sub-program of the Friends that was started in 2016, because there wasn't really like a unified trail stewardship presence in the Canmore area. So when we do work at the Nordic Center and Razors, it's often under like the CTA umbrella, but essentially it's like a sister project of the Friends, just kind of wearing different hats, but still organized out of the same office where Nancy is.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty exciting. It's an exciting project or initiative because it's around a lot of partnership and collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and hopefully Spin Sisters can come and help out on some trail days this summer as well, if things, if we're allowed to. Okay, so you guys already touched on some of the stakeholders and land managers that you work with. And maybe you can just talk a bit more about how those relationships work as well. I don't know if you can give a couple examples maybe, or, because you guys have a large area, so.
I'd say, over 20 years of existence definitely feeds into the partnerships. The Friends of Kananaskis Country has what's called a cooperating agreement, and so that really formalizes specifically with Alberta Parks our partnership, and it frames what our roles and responsibilities are, and in that it gives us some leverage in that we're maybe a more established partner. And so we are actually right now just redoing a new cooperating agreement that will last for the next 10 years. There's also been, I'll just add like a shift in how Parks traditionally was and the direction that it's going. So traditionally they would have ongoing, I'd say, trail staff that would be on a permanent annual cycle. So those people were working kind of probably supervising and working trails in the summer, and then doing ski track setting in winter. And then in the summer, they could really hire seasonal staff. And so Kananaskis, for the most part, has really been more specific on Alberta Parkside, really well maintained with the resources. Public lands was managed slightly different in that regard. And so we're seeing especially over the last 2 years, a bit of an evolution shift in how they've traditionally done things. And so traditionally, I should add as well, like parks would, through their staff, have these projects. They'd invite volunteers to come and take part. The Friends would recruit volunteers, and then we kind of work assisting Alberta Parks. What's changing and how it's evolving is we're now independently leading our own projects and not working so much under park supervision for various different reasons, primarily that they just have such big cuts that are starting to take place that their resources and their model is really changing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we will be doing this summer won't be so much in assisting parks, but more carrying out our own initiatives.
Mm.
That's kind of it's an exciting new chapter because it allows us to really fill in the gaps and sink our teeth in adding value and having more control. Doesn't mean that by any stretch that we get to do what we want out there on the landscape. Like, there's a pretty rigorous approach around how you have to have your activities approved, and then you receive what's called a letter of authority, some authority that you can then go about implementing those approved activities. So there is no carte blanche where you get to go out there and just make it better.
Yeah.
So there is some oversight, I'd say, ongoing control in that there's an approval process. And would you add anything?
Yeah, so I mean, a few examples of the relationship. One razor's edge would be, local groups like the Friends and CAMBA and other like folks in the Bow Valley mountain bike community looking at razors and seeing an opportunity to make it better, make it safer, make it more of an experience, approaching parks with this idea, getting the authority to do the work, and then we can kind of go and schedule our own work days around it and have much more of a feel that it's our project. And then another example of a relationship is when someone from parks emails you at 4 o'clock and says, hey, can you get 6 volunteers to come and work on the Grassy Lakes Trail tomorrow at 9 in the morning? And so sometimes it works that way, bureaucracy and procedure aside, where sometimes they have this work plan months in advance. Sometimes we're responding to last minute things like that. And it's great because we have about, how many registered volunteers do we have? Anyway, usually like we can put out like an 11th hour call and like rally like 5 or 6 people for the next morning. So it's pretty awesome. Like,
that is amazing.
We're a really dedicated group that's always keen to get out there.
Like, a few highlights are so our members, like our volunteer fellowship, I guess, because is 1,600 roughly, or just under. Last year we kind of coordinated 51 trail events that engaged 343 individual volunteers who turned out like, I don't know, over 400 times. So many of them, we've got kind of the repeat diehards out there, and then lots of volunteers who just want to try it, and then kind of been there, done that. And we recorded just over 2,400 hours towards the improvement. So that's throughout the whole landscape that we've mentioned.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's very impressive. And I guess on that note as well, what projects will the Friends of Kananaskis be working on this season in light of COVID-19? I guess it's ever evolving and changing, but.
Yeah, it seems like every day something new pops up. I mean, every year, regardless of COVID, like, safety is our priority for our volunteers, for our staff, and for the public that are out on the trails that we're working on. So, that's still the main priority. There's a lot of uncertainty about when we'll be able to get out there. Right now we're working on enhancing our health and safety policies and just kind of adding like in the COVID procedures to our operations so that we meet all the federal and provincial standards that we need. I would say as a trail stewardship organization, we've had our own version of social distancing for years called the Circle of Death. And it's basically like the space that you want to maintain around yourself when you're swinging tools. So we're really good already at social distancing when we're out working, and we'll just have to figure out things like not sharing tools, disinfecting things, lots of cleaning, and being cognizant of when hikers or bikers are coming down the trail and giving space and stuff. But
Tim, that's so going to be our inside joke this year. This whole like it's going to have like a whole.
yeah, but it does change every day. I mean, just today, Nancy heard from someone with public land, and it gave us some hope that we'll be out a lot sooner than we'd hoped. So one of the things that we're really keen to get going this year is a new light trail work program. Will be sort of small groups going out with limited tools, just to do the really small touch-ups, small little drainage issues. Sometimes it's just a matter of doing a little bit of raking of some accumulated dead stuff from the winter that causes puddling and pooling, or creating some little drainage nicks, and then just doing like brush removal and stuff like that. So that light trail work program appeals to a lot of our volunteers that are sometimes older. We have a lot of retirees, so people that aren't necessarily into shoveling rock and dirt for 6 hours, but are happy to get out and walk a trail and kind of do a pre-season assessment and do some light work.
Nice.
But yeah, if everything went well, like Razor's Edge for sure is a big priority. And we have some hopes to get in the Nordic Center. And like I mentioned, hopefully getting up on some of those trails on Cox and Jumping Pound too.
Nice. And what other events, you mentioned the Lights Trail Days, does Friends of Kananaskis put on throughout the season, and will these be able to go ahead given the current COVID-19 situation?
So last year we kicked off a trail building workshop. So it's a trail building 101, and it's a bit of the basis, like it's trying to have a bit of a curriculum that there'd be the 101 that then builds on the next one and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much the whole getting in there and digging around, but really more about like trying to just provide some of the theoretical of what is like what are elements that go into trail design. Mm-hmm. And so that you can actually look at the trail and kind of dissect some of these built-in elements. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot about like call it trail anatomy. And in this workshop, in addition to then understanding the various tools, and of these tools, what the right tool for the right job and so forth. And then we will be running at least one of our trail building workshops. So if anyone would be interested in that, we'll keep Fiona posted and she can share it. Somewhat in the past, we haven't done it in the last year or two now, we did a Trails Fest. Trail Fest was kind of an opportunity to celebrate trails, people, and culture was the tagline. Spin Sisters came and participated in one of our Trail Fests, and it was an opportunity to showcase all like clubs and organizations and groups that relate to trail recreation, and kind of have people learn more, like orienteering, for example. If you had never gotten into that, well, then you can ask some questions, and who knows, you might kind of explore that some more. So Trails Fest was a great event. We'll see. We're trying to rethink the model so that it kind of evolves a little bit. The idea was maybe if it could have a some type of conference that kind of had allowed for trail discussions that Alberta. There isn't really that forum right now.
Totally, because there's one in BC.
Yeah, exactly.
A conference like last year, I think it was in Whistler. So
these things are big in the U.S., but I mean, having something here would just maybe allow us to have more conversations and have more awareness as well as a result of the do's and don'ts of what's possible.
Yeah.
And then we have for several years done a winter and more recently a summer speaker series that's all things related to Kananaskis. And that was in the winter at the University of Calgary, and in the summer, in the winter and summer, there'd also be some speaker events in Peter Lougheed at their info center. And we're just, I mean, Alberta Parks was a big partner in that, and there's just a few unknowns about whether we're going to sustain that event. So those three are kind of outside of our trail work, elements of how we are trying to do education. We have a monthly newsletter that if you like Kananaskis, it's really informative. It talks about, you can go on our website, there's top right, it says join, and you can join our newsletter. Comes out once a month, and I'd say it's pretty good quality. I'd like
you guys
it.
are doing a good job.
And then another way to kind of keep in touch is joining and creating a volunteer profile. And then we use it's called the What's Happening newsletter, and that's more kind of, if you're interested more in our projects and volunteering, that's really targeted to the what's happening on trails. So that's kind of our communication front of things.
Those are some great initiatives that you have. Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to do a couple of those throughout the season, and definitely keep me updated on your trail building 101. That sounds great. Okay, so if you guys can just discuss trail etiquette and how members can lower their impact on the trails during the spring when everything is melting and wet.
Tim and I were just talking about that. There's there's my, I don't want to say this is like scientific by any means, but this is one of my theories of why we don't want to always be pushing the envelope when it comes to the soggy. And so spring, and I'd say similar to when it's a series of wet days like we've had this week, things to consider is that no trail is perfect. And therefore, if there's a puddle on a trail, it's a result of poor drainage. And poor drainage means that the water will just pool. And that water, as we are kind of riding through it, is mixing with the material. And we're kind of now losing the good tread material, which we'll talk more about at the workshop when we see each other there, and or at our trail building session when we see each other there. But there is a certain material, and it's more clay. We call it the mineral soil. So typically a trail is not at the top level of your organics, but it's just below that. And that's like that really hard, more clay, and it actually drains. And those puddles, what happens is it starts to mix in more organics from maybe the trail sides are collapsing and so forth. And you just end up not really having as good of a trail, in that now we're riding through it and we're encouraging more of that mixing. And then that puddle doesn't go away because it ends up being an issue until it gets resolved through improved drainage, for example, and then fixing the tread. So I just wanted to give an example as to those puddles are there usually for a reason. It's either not draining or the material is not allowing it to be porous anymore. And the more we kind of are splashing in there, the more we're mixing it. And so that's often what happens in the spring, is that things are just, they stay soft until they harden. And yeah, I just wanted to share more of that example, or the concept of what's going on.
That's a really good example. I appreciate you sharing that. It's a good explanation. Yeah. Nice.
It seems to be like an issue every year in Canmore. This year I think it's been amplified just with COVID, and it seems like more and more people are coming out to ride here. But every year there's, Canbo's putting out messaging like, if you have to ride, go early in the morning while things are still frozen. If you're leaving ruts, it's a pretty good sign that the trail's not ready. And one of the challenges around here is there's so many undesignated trails that they're not necessarily built to a standard that's designed to hold up for a lot of wet weather riding. So if there's a sustainably built trail like the High Rockies is probably one that you could ride in pretty wet weather because it's really well drained and it's fairly compacted. But around here, we seem to have that issue every year where we have long winters. Fat biking's alleviated a little bit because people can get their fix all winter long. But as soon as there's word that there's like 50 meters of something dry on Horseshoe, all of a sudden everyone's like, game on, let's go.
Yeah.
I as a trail stewardship group, I think there's definitely some opportunities for more signage and more resources for people to find information on what's ready and what's good to go and what isn't. The local shops in Canada do a pretty good job of spreading the message, but it's really sometimes it just comes down to if people are willing or not to like sacrifice that ride. And if they get into a trail and it's wet and muddy, be willing to turn around and get out the road bike or go watch Netflix or something. It's hard. Everyone wants to get out riding, but it's just really been amplified this year because things were quite wet. Sort of in the last 2 weeks of April was when there was a lot of people riding and things definitely weren't ready. And with a lack of, it's volunteers that have to go and fix those trails. So.
Yeah, there's going to be that that bit of it's not so much guilt, but I think the more volunteers are going to be out there and engaging trail users, then you kind of can sometimes have a different perspective because you've put your elbow into it. Tim raised a good point that I'll just quickly build on is the designated versus undesignated trails is a really big one in our trail network and larger system. I mean, throughout Kananaskis, there are guidebooks that are taking some of that into consideration, but also really highlighting areas that are unique for all their unique reasons. And within every trail, there's also activity designation. And so Kananaskis, for the most part, is multi-use. Therefore, you could be on foot, on bike, and on horse. And then some of them in the winter would have cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and so all not like we're talking. And the Friends I should have highlighted is also all non-motorized, and so there are different managed areas that are more for the motorized recreation.
Nancy, is there fat biking trails in Kananaskis?
Yes, there are.
Around
Kananaskis Village, and a few in Peter Lougheed, I think, as well. And so they've really taken the approach of if it's a snowshoe trail, it can be a fat bike trail. So trails in and around between Chester Lake and Sawmill, for example, are kind of going about that approach. Similar in Peter Lougheed and the Village. In the Village, though, they have started doing a bit of grooming. But that's all new in the last year and a bit. So it's not, they're catching up on that front. And so, I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot being used that are both sanctioned and non-sanctioned. And for the most part, the sanctioned ones have a multi-use element to them. So different criteria go into ensuring that it offers the right experience for multi-useness.
Are you allowed to bring dogs into Kananaskis?
Depends. Tim might know more about this.
Yeah, I think pretty much the only area that there isn't dog on leash requirements are public land use zones. Anything that's a provincial park, provincial recreation area, wildland provincial park, dogs are permitted. They're just supposed to be leashed at all times. There are a few ski trails where dogs aren't permitted in the winter, but I think anything where it's a fat bike trail, you could bring a dog, and supposedly you're supposed to have it on leash while you're fat biking too. So.
Tricky.
Yeah, that would be a bit tricky. Okay, how do you come up with trail names, or how have trail names been developed, I guess, in the past?
I wish, yeah, I mean, I wish we could do more of that. That'd be super fun and tap into our creative sides. Like so many of the trails in K country have been around for so long. I mean, most of them are just tied into like a geographical feature, whether it's a creek or a peak. So I don't know. There's not like a ton of like really cool creative trail names that have a cool story behind them. The one that I do know of at the Nordic Center, the EKG Trail, which is kind of cool because you hear EKG and then you look at the trail elevation profile and it looks like an EKG of someone having some heart issues. But it's actually named after the three guys that built it, Eric, Ken, and Greg.
Oh, Erica, a girl, Erica, who used to.
Erica. Sorry, I
Yep.
thought it was Eric Trio or a crew guy.
No, I think it's Erica Jensen, who actually used to work for FKC.
Okay, well there you go. So EKG, that's
Nice.
one. The Sawmill Chester Trails that Nancy mentioned has been a project of ours for the past few years, and those are the winter snowshoe fat bike trail network. And we finished a few of those this summer, and then we had a contest to name them. And Alberta Parks got the final say, so the names were like pretty like white bread, like Snowflake and Lizards and stuff. But some of the suggestions we got were a little more exciting. But yeah, we don't build a lot of new trails, so there's not a ton of opportunity to actually do a lot of naming, unfortunately.
Well, fair enough. Okay. Oh, sorry, Nancy, do you want to add something?
No, I was just joking. We need to continue to put more ownership out there in our work so that we can have the privilege.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, so how is the Friends of Kananaskis funded? And you, Nancy, you already touched on how the UCP funding cuts to parks have impacted Friends of Kananaskis operations. And then how can Spin Sisters make a donation to Friends of Kananaskis?
Sure. Yeah, so to be honest, we get zero support from, and this is kind of not new. In our model, we do not get any provincial funding from, I'd say, like their operations for us to support our organization for the work that we do. When we do or have received government funding, it's through competition of an Alberta type of grant application, and we're kind of going about it just as every other application is going about it, and it's based on merit. And so a lot of, I'd say, a lot of our funding is fundraised through grant applications. The Calgary Foundation is a big supporter, along with a few other family foundations that are within the Calgary region. And then we do depend on individual donations quite a bit as well. And we're really proud that that has been a growing type of revenue for us, funding source. A few years ago, we kicked off our Trail Love Give Back fundraiser. It's every fall, and it's an opportunity for people to kind of come at the, once we've wrapped up the season, we kind of showcase what we do and really encourage people to help us out to continue to do more and build on our successes. And so Trail Love is definitely become a good source of a once a year. We really push for it. Not really the organization who's always out there trying to kind of ask for people to support us, but we depend on it is what it comes down to. And so especially in these times, our work, I think, will be, if not more important, now that more people are going to be using our trails. Parks is having lots of cuts. You may have heard in the news how they are no longer wanting to be in the business of grooming, but that was definitely a headline. What didn't really kind of make the headline is that they also hardly have any capacity for trail maintenance anymore. So the dependence on groups like ours and you folks to really give back is probably at its highest, and I don't see that changing. And or yeah, the priority is, I think we're on a bit of an uphill trend here for the pressure on that.
Fair
So
enough.
if you would like to support us, two ways. You, as we've spoken, you coming out and volunteering and being a part of kind of trail culture is definitely a great way to give back. And then on our website, there's a donate button.
Nice. Okay, and okay, can you comment on the way in which trails are funded and supported by the BC government, which has allowed the development of tourism dollars to numerous locations due to the development of mountain bike trails in locations such as Squamish, Whistler, and Fernie, Golden, and how can Alberta follow the same example for locations such as Kananaskis, Bragg Creek, Cronus Pass, and Canmore?
That's a good one. And yeah, Nancy and I were chatting about looking a bit more into what goes on in BC. I think a few perspectives. One being that Kananaskis and the Bow Valley exist in a fairly significant area for wildlife in terms of the number of animals that still survive and thrive here, and also the number of threatened species on the landscape. And the fact that we're surrounded by protected areas. You know, we have national parks, we have provincial and wildland parks. So much of the landscape on which our trail network is based sits on these protected areas. So there's certainly maybe another layer of government and restrictions that are involved in getting trails on the land here, as opposed to a place like Golden or Fernie, for example. I think another issue too, and I may be wrong about all these towns, but I'm fairly certain all the ones that you listed are resort municipalities, and they have the ability to impose a visitor tax that goes into directly supporting recreation infrastructure like trails. And I know that's something that Canmore and Banff and Jasper have really pushed for, especially in the last election, is how can these towns have the ability to like charge this extra visitor tax to support the expenses that they put into supporting such huge increases in tourism. So I think that's a big difference between those BC communities and here. And I don't know as well, like I think in terms of like the mountain bike experience, we definitely, in the Bow Valley anyway, like it's a pretty fragmented landscape in terms of land management. There's like town, there's parks, there's public lands, and sometimes it's just really hard to move things forward more quickly without sort of a cohesive focus on mountain bike tourism. And I know that's something that Canva is really working hard towards. But I think right now there's an opportunity for groups like Spin Sisters and other cycling organizations to present an economic case of the value of mountain bike tourism to the province right now, while it's so focused on doubling tourism spending in the next decade. And especially as we see the oil and gas sector struggling, like tourism definitely needs to be a cornerstone of the new economy. And mountain biking is one of those quiet recreations that's certainly a growth sport, and you know, has so many different sort of niche sides to it that there's some opportunity for sure. I don't know if the best way is just for people to like engage with their MLAs about it, just so that mountain biking is more top of mind.
Yeah, and I actually heard some bike shops are reporting 50 to 7% increase in sales over last season. So it's just growing, and especially during this time period, everyone just wants to get out and ride their bikes and be outside. So yeah. And Nancy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, like I think of protected areas, I'll just call it, in comparison to in BC, there's just a lot of public land, and it's been very twofold. One is it makes it very easy to work with maybe one land manager, and in areas where you're not trying to balance all these landscape components of how it's used, and so that there's recreation, but here there's just so many more things that are in that balanced equation of sustainability. And And I'll just add on the other side, yeah, it's a bit of a different mentality, I will unfortunately say, in BC when it comes to recreation, in comparison to Alberta, and how what the priority and how the value of it has been kind of in a more governmental land management side of things. So it's a tricky one. I mean, we definitely want to see change and see more. Yeah, there's the value side of just embracing it and really recognizing that we have lots to work with, and it's not like we're trying to create a tourist destination. We already have it. It's how do we really make it, yeah, like a very high experience type of tourism destination.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Okay, so next question here. Okay, so maybe I'll start with this one. How do you feel about the advent of bike packing? And Tim, I know Nancy told me that you're really into bike packing, so I don't know if you want to take this one, and maybe you can tell us your favorite bike packing adventure in K Country.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I know like bike touring has been around for forever, and there's this ongoing debate like, well, what is bike packing really, other than just going bike touring on a mountain bike or on dirt roads? But anyway, a friend of mine who started Bike Pack Canada, like he kind of says it's like off-road touring, generally with like softer bags as opposed to like a traditional pannier setup. So yeah, I got into it a few years ago when I went to a Bikepacking 101 presentation at the Patagonia store in Banff, and slowly just pieced together like various bags and stuff. And one thing about it that's great is you can kind of do it with any bike that you have, and you don't need to spend a fortune on a bikepacking bike or all the fancy bags. You can do a lot with a couple of dry bags and some voile ski straps to lash stuff to your bike and get out for a quick overnighter. So I kind of got into that way. I initially did a lot of trips on my fat bike, which was very slow and sluggish and heavy, and then got like a second 29er wheel set for that bike. So it's like a rigid 29er that's great for gravel roads and occasional single track. So I've done a lot of just kind of overnighters from Canmore, you know, going into Banff, like biking as far as we can down Minnewanka before it gets dark, and then getting back to Canmore for work the next day. And then I've done a few longer races and stuff in BC and Alberta. But yeah, we're definitely fortunate here to be able to kind of leave from our back doors, whether it's in Canmore or even in Calgary. Like, you know, I've figured out a route to get to my brother's house in Calgary where I can be on dirt for most of the time without hitting a lot of pavement. But in terms of getting into it, it's really just, yeah, thinking about whether or not you enjoy longer rides, and, you know, figuring out a bike that's comfortable and fits well for you. As far as favorites, there's a really nice loop route from Canmore that goes up and over Skogan Pass into K Country, and then you can take the Powder Face Road down to Elbow Falls, and that can be kind of your first camp night. That's a long day, actually. This is a bit of a long first day, but it can be an overnighter or like a 3-nighter depending on your pace. But it's basically a loop that goes from Canmore down to Elbow Falls and then up over the Big Elbow Loop, past Elbow Lake to Highway 40, and then you can ride the Smith Dorian Road or the High Rockies Trail all the way back. But I'd say probably one of my favorite places to do a trip is the west side of Spray Lake. If you go past the campground, the road sort of ends, but there's an old TransAlta road that takes you all the way on the west side of the lake, and you can avoid the dusty Smith Dorian Road. So that's one of my favorite loops from Canmore, as like a one-nighter if I'm feeling energetic, or like 2 to 3 nights if you want to just go out and camp. But.
Wow, sounds pretty amazing. You sound pretty fit.
No, I'm slow and steady.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. And do you see, I guess, yeah, like, have you seen many people bikepacking in Kananaskis over the last couple of years? Like, do you see the increase in popularity?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, there's the Great Divide mountain bike route starts in Banff and goes all the way down to Mexico. So you do see a lot of people coming through K Country down the Smith Dorian Road and up over Elk Pass on that route. But more and more, like every shop seems to have a few bits of bikepacking kit, and you definitely see more people rolling around Canmore on any given weekend, either heading out or rolling through Canmore as part of a route. But it definitely seems to be gaining some traction. Anyone that likes camping, you're camping on a bike, and there's the self-sufficiency side of it that I really like, just having everything I need with me to get out for a night or two. And yeah, it's kind of fun. It's a neat way to see the landscape. And some people do some fairly technical single track riding with maybe more of a minimal setup and using a full suspension bike. That'd be a blast. Like do the whole High Rockies trail would be a great bikepacking route if you're willing to go a bit lighter with carrying the weight. But it's definitely a growth part of the cycling world for sure.
Yeah, I think it'd just be a lot of fun and adventurous, I guess. Yeah, like you said, if you're into camping.
Yeah.
Okay, and then another question here: how do you feel about the advent of free ride mountain biking and peak bagging? And are you seeing much of that gaining in popularity in K country over the last couple of years as well?
Well, I was thinking about that a bit more. I was remembering that I was in Revelstoke last year, and I had some friends who were doing that, which seems to like maybe that's quite of an area that traditionally has had more of that type of approach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't say that it's something that we've really been hearing or getting feedback from in terms of our membership or conflict or kind of, who knows from which angle. I mean, I'd be curious to learn more if there are areas that are becoming more common for this sort of activity, and like, by no means we're not, FKC is not a police on anything. It's more just understanding how recreation and trails and this new type of sport activity in this area may be growing. I'd be curious to know more, just because I think one thing that could occur is, I mean, like I said, it's learning, it's knowing more, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this is happening more in unsanctioned areas that are not quite as designated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just, if it starts to gain popularity and it becomes more of a downhill type of fast speed experience that has traditionally been maybe more of a hiking approach, then who knows what type of, not so much conflict, but just how that might get some attention.
Oh, fair enough. Tim, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would share Nancy's perspective. I honestly, I know it's a thing, but I've never really seen it, and I'd be really curious to hear from you or anyone on the call, if anyone here does it. Are there places that are kind of known as places that are fairly easy hike-a-bikes that you could get to the top of a peak and have a pretty awesome ride down? I think.
Well, I heard people going to Door Jam.
Fiona, you sound so.
Sorry. I heard people going to Door Jam Peak last weekend. There's this big rock slab. I don't know. I saw some pictures on social media of some people doing Door Jam Peak, which I think is that near Razor's Edge. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Look it up, but anyway, so that's one spot, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've again, with the whole thing about so much of Kananaskis being protected lands, I think if it started becoming more of a thing, then there might be more focus on what activities are actually allowed on trails. But I'm assuming, for the most part, there's way more undesignated trails than there are designated, and it seems like every single peak, if you go down the Smith Dorian, there's a trail up to the top of it, and a lot of them are popular scrambles. So I would assume that if any are being used for free riding or peak bagging, that those are the up tracks that people are using, or established hiking or scrambling routes, and then riding down. So if someone's a long-term K country hiking fanatic, and all of a sudden they're starting to see mountain bike traffic, there'll definitely be like an adaptation period, much as there was when fat bikes started appearing on winter trails.
Mhm.
I think it's like, I would love it to be able to have the skill set to ride some of those scrambling trails. I'm sure it'd be a blast. I don't have the bike for it, but yeah, as of now, like I don't think it's really like on the radar of parks as being a thing. And I'm really curious like where people are actually going to do it, but I've never actually seen anyone out.
I mean, I love that. So Strava has recently had a bit of a change in in how its privacy, we'll call it, or sharing, and something that had become popular that maybe would just have a bit of similarity is, so an individual could kind of suggest, oh, here are all these enduro types of time kind of laps and so forth. You get people doing them, but they were, for the most part, in this area, not on designated trails. And so how it was changing maybe the approach of people going and using these trails because of this new purpose that someone's gone ahead and done that isn't necessarily approved or kind of following the ideal use of the landscape. Like, yeah, that kind of snowballed a little bit. So not saying it has those same characteristics, but it's a similar example that has seen maybe some discouraged activity, or it drew some attention that wasn't necessarily seeing it as a good type of organized event.
Yeah, fair enough.
Formally organized, but then you're still kind of encouraging. There's a means to encouraging people to do that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah, and who knows how popular it will be around this area? Like it, yeah, like you were saying, might be more in Revelstoke or like Squamish Whistler area. But get your guys' take on that. Okay, and then another question here about bike packing as well. Do you think some of the campsites in Kananaskis will be used more frequently for bike packing in the future, given its continuing popularity?
I'd love to say yes, with the fact that like Alberta Parks is actually closing campgrounds around the province. It's not super encouraging. I guess the thing with bike packing and with through hikers is, the ability to have hiker-biker sites where there's a no turn away policy is something that's been really successful in the US on popular backcountry and bike touring routes in general. But I was encouraged. I know there's been some conversations about these types of sites in Kananaskis. So they'd be hiker-biker sites with a no turn away policy.
So sorry, Tim, when you say hiker-biker, no turnaround, or no, could you just explain that? So basically if somebody shows up, they can camp, they're not going to be turned away?
Yeah, exactly. Like right now, if I was to ride down to Kananaskis Lakes on a Friday night, my chances are pretty slim that there'd be an open site for me to just rock up to and be able to pay and stay for the night. So the idea with the hiker biker sites is it's, if it's just a bike, you don't need a huge expanse like you do with a trailer or even a car camping setup. And yeah, there'd be a no turn away policy. So it would just I think it would help grow the bike packing options, because it would give people some assurance that they'd be able to find a place to lay their head after riding 40 kilometers without worrying about having to like illegally camp in the woods somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Hiker biker sites are encouraging, but with the cuts to parks, I'm not sure that's going to be happening soon. The other thing too, like in wildland, provincial parks, and public land use zones, you can random camp as long as you follow regulations for minimum distances from roads and stuff. So it can be easier for someone on a bike to find sort of a stealth campsite that's perfectly legal as long as you're following those regulations. But I would love to see hiker biker sites and not worry about getting turned away and having to. My friend of mine got a $200 fine. He was riding from Coleman to Canmore, and like he was just done, and all the campgrounds were full, so we just pulled off this like little side road on the Smith Dorian, and I guess like a conservation officer had been following the race tracker and like went into the bush at like 11 at night and gave him a ticket.
Oh, that's really sad.
He's like 72. He's the nicest guy.
Wow.
Did they make him pack up?
No, they just made him like hang his food better and gave him a fine.
Aw.
He had a bear hang and everything. He was doing it right. He was like, yeah, anyway.
Maybe add
But-
that to your letter to your MLA.
Yeah, really, yeah. Wow.
But yeah, there's lots of good cases of hiker biker sites in the U.S. that work really well, and it's just a great way to boost bike packing and bike tourism.
So Tim, would that be like a policy change, and would there be any further modifications to a campsite, or what would that entail?
Yeah, mainly modifications to a campsite. So just adding on like kind of an area. Usually all that's required is some flat ground, maybe a picnic table and some food lockers. And a lot of them have like charging stations too, because a lot of people will have their navigation phone or GPS that you might need to charge up at the end of the night. So yeah, very little footprint. So there'd be a hard cost to actually put some of this infrastructure in, but yeah, not as much as putting in like a full pad for an RV with power and stuff like that. So.
That's kind of neat. Huh. Okay, so I'm going to ask any of the people on the call if they have any questions. If they have any questions they want to ask, maybe everyone's going to be quiet. If not, you can type them in, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. Okay.
I'd be curious to, like, of those on the call, who have some of you come out and done trail work? Has that kind of been an opportunity, or?
Oh, I don't know. I think people might be shy.
It's Michelle here.
Oh, there's Michelle. Yep.
Just to say, yes, I've done some volunteer trail work in the past, but not with the Friends of Kananaskis. So that's one of the reasons. Oh, did I cut out?
Oh.
Oh, sorry, I thought I disappeared. So yeah, so I was interested, and I want to thank you for your excellent talk, your great information, and now I'm going to go back on mute.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Josephine. I've done trail building in Inglewood or by TELUS Science Center. And I have to say, with the mountains being closed, it's been amazing having something where I can just get on my bike and go with my kids. And would love to see that land further developed, because I thought it was amazing, like just to get out for an hour in and out and have my children join me. So
I think Simba worked on that.
Simba, I did it with my kids. I was like literally 8 months post baby, and I took my 2 girls out with me. They were probably, I want to say 6 and 4 or 7 and 4 at the time. They had a fantastic time, and it's fun now because I'm riding with them, and I'm like, you built this section, we built this section. So
Awesome.
it's great, and hopefully we'll get out there. After riding it now, I'm like, I can totally see the beauty in building them, because it's nice. And then I've taken out like our neighbors and their kids, and it's been a lot of fun during this time, really. So hopefully we get more people out, and you'll definitely see me out building more.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been great.
We are hoping to offer, maybe not so much this year, but it is definitely going to become a higher priority that we offer more family types of trail day opportunities.
My girls did a lot of running. I just said, go get water for people. Go ask if that man wants water. So they would run up and down the little hill and get water for people. But because it was hard, like the tools are heavy. But
oh yeah, it's
a lot of work.
Call it like kind of like CrossFit type of cross training, CrossFit.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. And okay, well, I guess do you guys have any other closing comments that you want to close with at all?
A big thank you to Spin Sisters for your support and for your interest in learning more about the Friends of Kananaskis Country. And I think this is a really good partnership and good fit that I'd really like to build on opportunities to work together and engage on projects that are of interest to your group. And And also wanted to share some appreciation with the donation that you have provided as a club to the organization. Thank you. It's really much appreciated.
You're welcome. And Tim, do you want to say anything else as well to close?
Yeah, just thanks for having us on here. It's always great to connect with fellow trail enthusiasts, and really hopeful that we'll be able to get out at some point this summer. So we'll keep in touch about a trail day, and if it doesn't work this year, anytime. But yeah, I hope everyone has lots of good time on the bike this year. And if anyone has any more bike packing questions, send them my way.
Nice. I might be in touch about bike packing. Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time, like I said, to join tonight. That was great. And yeah, like you said, Tim, hopefully we can organize a trail day.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah.
you. Later.
Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.